That's great. I just got my next article written. I love it.
Okay, back into it. Page 68. This one comes up actually more often than I thought when I first saw it. I actually had it come up a couple times since Mike and I started talking about it recently. How are these situations treated? Previous bets not pulled in. A player responds to a raise with a silent overchip or mixed chips. Is change, return, or added to the bet? A player, this is example A, a player has no change coming back from a prior bet chip. Prior bet chips are considered in the pot. Example, 1 in 2,000, player puts in two $1,000 chips. B raises to 4,000. It's 2,000 more to A, who silently puts in a 5K chip. This is a call by the overchip rule. Example 2, A responds with two 2500s, which are not generally chips, but we'll use it for this example. Two 2500s. This is a raise by the multi-chip rule. Anybody has a problem with that? B, change is due. The change does not cover the new raise he's facing. Lines rate 1600, player puts out two 1Ks, 400 change is due. Okay, now B makes it 5K, 3,400 more to A. A puts out one 10K chip. This is an overchip call. Now example 2 is the one where they have the issue. A puts in two 5K chips. This is a raise of 12,000 total unless A asks for change back before his chips hit the surface. So I think that one's fine.
In math, there's a bit of a math error there in example 1 under B, blinds 800, 1600. A puts out two 1,000 chips. Hopefully that's clear with 2,000 total.
Right. Okay. Now the previous bet not pulled in. Change is due and is enough to cover a new raise. Any chips added to that raise will be combined with the prior chips. The 50% raise threshold is reached, with the 50% threshold being reached. Example A, player bets 1,500 with a 5K chip. B raises to 4,000, 2,500 more to A. A then puts out another single 5K chip into the pot. It's a raise because it's more than the 50% standard. Everybody okay with that? Even though it's a single chip, he had the right amount of chips out there, or more than. He's already got a call out there, a call amount out there, so he's put 5,000 more on top of it. So it is a raise, and it is a raise to the total amount. Now, what I hear sometimes in this situation is that 5K represents 1,500, right? So players say that the additional 500 would make the bet a total of 6,500, and we do not believe that to be correct. So we want to clarify that the change is added to the amount to complete the total amount of the raise. Does everybody follow that? Okay. D, player pulls part of his prior bet chips back in and adds new chips to them. Now this one's come up quite often, like recently too. Example is 50 and 100. Small blind posts 50 with two 25s. Action folds to the small blind. The small blind takes back 25 and then adds 50 or 500 to the existing chip. This is a raise if it hits 50% or more of the raise. Now I know that some of the people in this room said that they've had some issues with that. Do you guys agree that that is the case? He has 50 out there, two quarters. He's taken one of the quarters back and put out a $500 chip on top of it. Now, had he just thrown the 500 on top of the 50, it would have been a call, right? Had he taken out the two 25s and thrown in the 500, what would it have been?
A call.
A call. Now that he's left one of those chips in there and he's manipulated his bet, we now believe that is to be a raise. Does anybody have any questions about that? Does anybody need further explanation on that? Because I know that some people believe that that's still a call, and we now want to clarify that that is in fact a raise. Any issues? Okay.
That was easy.
Yeah. Previous bet chips not pulled in. How is each of these situations treated? If a player responds to a raise silently with an overchip or mixed chips, is change returned or added to the bet? See examples in the next slide. Skip over there.
No, it's what you just said, Matt. Because the example is the pulling both back.
Okay. Player pulls all prior chips back and then puts out new chips. 50 and 100 blinds, folds the small blind. The small blind takes back both 25s and puts out a single 500. This is an overchip call. Silent multiple chips are subject to the multi-chip rule. Okay. You want to add something to that? Anybody have questions about that? Did everybody understand that? Because it is a commonly asked question that has been coming up recently, and we want to clarify the fact that manipulating those chips, picking up both those chips, throwing back in, or just leaving one of those chips out there on that 50 and 100 and throwing a 500 on top, that will now be considered a raise. Everybody okay with that?
Yeah.
Excellent.
Okay.
Fast question, Matt. The big blind, if he pulls all of his chips back and then throws a single oversized chip.
All right, so let's do that one. 50 and 100, it's called 100 all the way around, and now the player takes out the single 100, which was a call, and throws in a 5. Everybody feels that should be a raise to 5? There's no raise to him. He's taken that 100 out on his turn and put out the 5. Now my example of that would be, let's say it was 3 or 4 away, and he takes that 100 out and puts in the 5. Has he now acted out of turn and made it a raise? Okay, what if he wanted change? Are we forcing him to raise as an out-of-turn bet, or we're just letting him? Once you put that 100 out, it's got to stay? Comments? No?
I would say if it's not his turn, he had the 100 out, and now he takes it back and switches it for a 500. I mean, I probably should have never done that in my life, but I have done that when I wanted change. When it wasn't my turn, the action's over there. I said, well, I'm almost out of black, so let me do that. So I would say it's unless it's. I would say it's not. If it's your turn, it's a raise.
But if it's not his turn, it's not action. It's But I would caution players to
not do it. Yeah.
to make their.
I probably had this question at least 10 times on Twitter. People asking
If it's
that
not
one.
your turn, I would say you didn't raise.
Yeah, if it's your turn, I would say that it's a raise.
Okay. Is everybody okay with that language?
Get Neil to answer your Twitter.
There's no reason for him to pull back the chip unless he wants to raise. Right?
Right.
When it's his turn. Yeah.
Yes.
When it's your turn.
I was just asking for clarification.
Okay.
I have a question on this too. So the one where you're saying it's a call when they throw in an existing chip, one of the things I see, and I know you've seen this too, is when they don't pull back the chip, but they pick up the chip. Is that change whether it's a call or a raise?
Give me the example.
So like the small blind has 50 in there, and let's say they throw in a 100 chip, and you're saying that's a call. So if they pick up the chips and put it in with 100, is that going to change it?
If they take the two chips
Give me an example.
plus
Give me an example of one where
chip.
where it's just a call, where you throw in a chip. So it's 50 and you just throw in a 500 chip or whatever. That's
a call.
That's a call.
Mm-hmm.
If you take the 500 chip and you pick up the 2 chips,
that's a raise.
That's a raise. So picking it up is the same as pulling them back to your stack and then putting them back out.
Correct. Okay.
I feel like that should be kind of clarified because I see that one asked all the time.
Right. The manipulation of those chips that are already existing in the pot with additional chips makes it a raise. Chris Gassney, Tulalip Casino.
I'm not sure I'm understanding. If he's got the 50 in and he throws in a 500 and takes back his 2 chips, you're going to call that a raise in the small blind?
No, that'd be a call. I'm saying
If he pulled the 2 chips back.
Picks the 2 quarters up and throws them out with it. Yeah. Or picks up one of the 2 quarter chips and throws out the 5. Okay. One of the common things that happens in tournaments all over, and I don't know why it doesn't come up more often. People will throw out a 5 and pick up the 2 like in one motion, and they're just intending to call. But I mean, it's very close to being a raise or being called a raise. So if we don't get called to the table on those, obviously nothing happens. But once you get called to the table, if it's something that you feel that is a raise, it's technically a raise. I think you have to call it a raise. You understand?
I've actually had players say it's 100 big blind, take the 100, pull it back, take a few seconds, and then throw the 100 back out again. Very confusing.
Okay, I think we can get those situations. I think we all agree that that's the way it is. So let's get some language for that. Count of another player's chip stack. Rule 21. Players entitled to a reasonable estimation of an opponent's chip count. When, if ever, may a player ask for a more exact count? Now, Dave Lamb, myself, and Jack feel it's when he's facing an all-in bet. Dave added, it's not just when facing a big bet. You're not entitled to exactly know how much more the guy has, but chips should be reasonably countable. And I think that we have that in the rule already. But it is one that comes up, again, quite often, that players ask, I want to know how many chips he has before I make my bet. We feel that it's a time waster. It's something that, are the players entitled to that exact count when not facing the bet? And we do not believe so. There are some that feel that it is. Does anybody have a strong argument why a player should be, before making a bet, is entitled to an exact count of a player's chips? Nope. Good.
Lunch slowed us down.
Yeah, we're good. Do we want a rule when an exact count may be requested? I think that the rule that we have covers that. No? Microphone. Microphone.
The only thing the rule currently says is that the player will maintain highest denomination chips, and that opponents are entitled to a reasonable estimation. We don't say anything about when a player might be entitled to a more or less exact count. Do we need to add that language, or is it just situational?
I think we do need to maybe add something that says when they are entitled to an exact count, and that would be facing an all-in bet from the other player. Anybody opposed to that language being added?
Well, do we need to say, like, when the chip stacks are close or anything? Like, if I can see that you've got 100,000 and I got 20,000, I don't think I'm entitled to count your chips because, you have me covered.
that's
and
not
it's obvious. But,
I mean,
if you have 20 and I have 20, now I can see it because it's going to be close.
It has to be pertinent.
Yeah, Kevin again from the Gardens. No, I think even if I only have 20,000 and he has 120,000, that I am entitled, because I want to know how much it's going to cost you from your stack. I mean, it's definitely strategy, especially online. But when you're playing tournaments, to know how much I can, if I can take a third of your stack, you're probably not going to call. But if I can only take,
But maybe a reasonable estimation, but I don't know about an exact. In that, with 100.
no, I'm saying
100,000,
before
20,000.
I act. Well, we're talking about just always entitled to know how much, right? I mean,
And then the second part of the question is, who has to provide that exact count? Does the player does the player who's in question have to provide it, or?
Player never has to say anything.
Player just has to make the chips clearly visible. And then that goes back to what we were talking about yesterday.
So
about
how is the
high
exact
denomination chips.
exact count determined if the player will not be cooperative?
I guess the floor person comes
Dealer
over.
or floor person.
Dealer or foreperson?
And he totally backs, he totally exposes his chips. He can't have his arms and whatever in front of him. And when players do that, of course, that's subject to penalty when they make it difficult to count their chips.
So Mike, add the language in about all-ins, facing all-ins, and then I think we're good. Other hands? No. All-in bet with chips found behind found later. Player A bets all in, B pushes out a stack, and B call.
Wait, so did we make a rule about when you
Yes.
can have an exact count?
Yes.
And what was the rule?
When facing an all-in.
Any all in. Okay.
Yeah. I don't think that comes up where somebody's so outnumbered and they just want an exact count. I think that's not going to
And
come
if it's a needle, then we.
Yeah, it's not a needle when you're shorter stacked, but obviously when you're bigger stacked, it's also could be substantial to ask. Okay, player A bets all in, pushes his stack out, and B calls. A chip or chips are found behind at the showdown, under a napkin, etc. How are these chips handled if A wins? What if B wins? How does accepted action apply here, if at all? Can a caller win the hidden chips but not pay off if he loses? Anybody?
Chip in the chair. Yeah, I mean this is a rule that has changed over the years many times, and probably now is as good a time as any to actually make a decision on it one way or the other, because it's been handled both ways. And Jack Strauss won the World Series of Poker by having a chip that did not play when he was all in. That I think is horrible now that looking back 30 years ago.
Guys, if I remember correctly, in 2011 we discussed very thoroughly that situation, and I think the guys from the Venetian they used a similar procedure as PokerStars has in their rules, and I think it's very fair. So, Neil, would you care to read how PokerStars addresses that?
Yeah, we have our rule 47 says is all in with hidden chips. It says an acknowledged all-in wager commits a player's entire stack to the hand, including any hidden chips. However, the all-in player is not allowed to benefit from the hidden chips. Example, player A goes all in for 21,000, player B calls with a stack of 100,000. Upon pushing the chips to the middle, player A discovers two 1,000 chips. This is after the showdown. Pushing the chips in, player A discovers two 1,000 chips under his arm. If player A wins the pot, he or she will only be paid 21,000 in chips. If he or she is eliminated from the tournament on that hand, the opponent will receive the entire 23K stack. The only exception to that is obviously if player B doesn't have him covered. The exception says player A goes all in for 50, player B calls with 55. Upon pushing the chips to the middle, player A discovers a 10K chip under his arm. If player A wins, he'll only get 50. If they lose, his opponent will receive the entire 55 that would have been his double up, but player A would then be remained with the 5K because he actually was the covering player.
That's it. That's if the chips are hidden. What are you going to do if it's miscounted? If he says I'm all in for 28 and the chips are there and he has 35 there.
1 second, let me find it.
That'd be the same thing. I would think. You can't benefit. You can.
Yeah, it's essentially accepted.
We've already covered that as accepted action in 2011, and I believe that the rule is sound. It's not ideal, but it's never going to be in that situation. So I think we have that covered, that the player has accepted the action.
And he's got to pay 35.
And he's got to pay the 35. We tried to get it different, but nobody seemed to think that was going to work. Carrying on. Moving on.
So do we like that wording?
Jeremy's
do we
got
want to
something.
have that wording?
In talking to a lot of people about this rule, there's a lot of controversy about the last one, where a caller can win the chip but not have to pay it off. He can win something that he doesn't have to pay off. The one thing that everybody seems to agree on is that if a player bets all in, all chips are bet. Won't be allowed to say, oh, hey, I found something here, I guess I'm still in. If you bet all in, if that was verbalized or gestured, all chips are at risk. But beyond that, there's such difference in how each house treats the remaining chips. Some, if it's a very small amount, may include it in an accepted action arrangement. Others will say, hey, I won't hold the caller to it. Others will say, I'll pay the caller off if he wins it, but I won't have him pay it off if he loses it. I mean, it's all over the board.
It's a tough one because what if it's egregious? What if it's a huge number?
Absolutely.
You know, that's what makes it tough.
Rule 1. So do we want to vote on Neil's wording there?
Wait, Jeremy's got. Get a microphone.
I think there does need to be a rule, and I think exactly what he just said is what we should put in there.
Okay. Anybody opposed to wording it that way? The way Neil just read it?
Tell you what, this is just me personally. I don't like the idea that somebody can win more than they can lose.
If the chips are...
What's that? In Neil's example, if you bet all in, you push out 18, but you've got a nickel behind, I can win the 18 and the nickel.
Yeah, but the question, Mike, is who should
But I don't have to pay it off if I lose.
who should be penalized in the situation, though? You thought you were calling 18,000. That's, I mean, within the example that you're saying, you thought it was 18,000.
I understand that. I think the all-in person should be penalized, but I don't see why the caller should have some windfall. But some do. I know some houses do. Will allow somebody to win the chip if they don't have to pay it off. I know that there are some houses that do that.
So you think the guy should have to win it or pay it off, even if he's
nobody's going to like to hear this, but I think the chip should be taken out of play.
Exactly.
You know, I mean, there is no good solution here, and I know we won't get agreement on it.
We make them forfeit if they're carrying their chips and conceal them. We make them forfeit those chips to us. So if they're hiding their chips on the table, they're forfeited again, I think.
It could be under a napkin, though, or
Yeah,
something like that.
but that's a great analogy. Chips that are hidden or,
I mean-
or not visible. That are, I mean, I like that in the transit analogy.
Right. I mean, I don't know a player that's going to hide his chip under a napkin. I mean, nearly everybody knows where their chips are and how they're going to play them. So someone to hide or lose a chip under a napkin, I mean, I think we forfeit that.
Yeah, but you're punishing the person who didn't make a mistake. I think in his example, the person that didn't have his chips in plain view or in that gets punished, and the person that is in the pot is protected.
I think anytime you have one of those situations, somebody's getting rewarded a little bit. When we talk about the out of turn, the skipped player, the who gets this, who gets that, the hand of poker we're playing has been skewed now. So something has to be done to recompense that. I think
what has to be done, Neil, at this point may be a house standards. But what we can all agree on is that the players is all in. What happens to that remaining chip?
Well, Mike, I think
what
what you were talking about, it actually creates another angle, because if I don't want you to win because I don't like you, I'll hide a couple chips under my napkin. Now, you don't win my 50,000, you only win 30. You know what I mean? I'm all in. You call, I see you got aces, I put a couple under my napkin, whatever the case may be. Now that 10,000 is taken out of play, he doesn't get it because I'm shooting another angle. So that's just something to bring up. That's a great angle to bring up, because the person that is rewarding, if you want to call it rewarding, is the person that didn't do anything wrong.
That's what I would say.
He didn't do anything wrong, but he never made the bet. He didn't make a bet for that chip. He was not at a risk.
Well, he called the all in, and if he hasn't
called the
covered,
all in, but you're not going to make him pay off that chip. So he did not call those chips. He only called what you're going to make him pay off. I mean, there's two sides of the coin. I fully understand what you're saying, but
yeah, both ways. I'm just saying, doing that other way, it can create a lot of problems.
There's a comment in the back. You're good.
They're calling for a vote
Neil, you wanna
on
read
Neil's
it?
proposal.
Read it. Okay.
Read it again. So
I guess the proposed question is the all-in with hidden chips. The rule we have says an acknowledged all-in wager commits a player's entire stack to the hand, including any hidden chips. However, the all-in player is not allowed to benefit from the hidden chips. Example, player A goes all in for 21,000, player B calls with a stack of 100,000. Upon pushing the chips to the middle, player A discovers two 1,000 chips under his arm. If player A wins the pot, he or she will only be paid 21,000 in chips. If he or she is eliminated from the tournament on that hand, his opponent will receive the entire 23,000 stack. The exception, number B, I guess, player A goes all in for 50,000, player B calls with a stack of 55,000. Upon pushing the chips to the middle, player A discovers a 10,000 chip under his arm. If player A wins the pot, he or she will only be paid 50,000 in chips. If he or she loses the pot, his opponent will receive the entire 55,000 of his actual stack for a complete double up.
okay.
All in favor?
One other thing to.
Okay.
Sorry, Mike. You told me to push the action, Mike.
No, I was going to say that if I see the chip, let's say I'm the caller, and the guy pushes out 50, and I see another 50 back behind him, I reckon the pot odds are totally skewed, totally different there. Because I'm only going to lose 50, but I can win 100. I mean, if you want to vote that in, that's fine. But
We did.
Okay.
We just did, Mike.
Dave Lamb sent a text in about which one was it? Chips. What number was that?
That was the one we just voted on. So.
No, the chips. The count. No. About getting an exact count of the chips. And he said only chips bet into the pot are entitled to an exact count. So that covers the all-in, and it covers a bet. So you're entitled to an exact count of the bet also. I think that's better language.
Yeah. His exact words are only chips bet into a pot should be subject to an exact count.
That's good.
Thank you, Dave Lamb, who's watching via the internet. Sitting in the lazy boy with his feet up. Only chips bet into a pot should be subject to an exact count.
So again, that covers the all-in and any bets that the player said, how much is that? Now they're entitled to that exact count. Okay, betting is expecting change. Now we want to obviously stop players from doing this, but bet of 325, and player says he put out 525, a 500 and a 25, or two 250s. Who has 250s, Mike?
I want to get 250 chips just to see the players go nuts.
2 1 3 67 and the thirds and a 25. So the players do this. They say that we're trying to break people from doing this. They say I bet 325 and they put out 525. So at that point, I think that's a procedure, and I think we need the dealers to push back that quarter and say the bet's 325.
But it speeds up the game when they make that like that.
Does it?
In a tournament where the dealers don't have change accessible other than asking another player, in my opinion, it really speeds up the action when I bet 325 and I put 5, or say I'm facing a bet of 325 and I put out 525. You know, it's the half bet rule on the one hand because it's multiple chips, but it's clear that I'm just trying to make it easy to make change. So do we need a rule there?
Because I think you have to say call.
Right, we want to encourage players to try to help us make change and to speed up the game, but we also want to clarify. We don't want them to gain the knowledge of, oh no, that was a call. Oh no, that was a raise. When it is an unclear bet, usually an unclear bet is going to be ruled the lesser of the two. But you know.
And under that math, that is you can. There's one chip you can remove, and you still have more than enough for a call. You can remove the quarter, and you still got the 500, which covers the 325. So just to maintain the betting discipline, unless the player clearly says, "Hey, I need change. I'm just calling," that's fine. But they push that out silently and expect to get us to understand it's a request for change. That's the gray area.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
We don't assume anything. We don't think that you're asking for change or anything. If you put in enough that would constitute a legal raise, we tell them that's a raise.
Right.
And then they don't do it again.
Right.
We don't want players to put in more money and just to get change. Let the dealers make change. They're going to have to give you change back anyway.
The solution is they just should say call before they put the chips in. And
exactly.
We just got a text to please ask people who are shuffling chips not to do so. Thanks, guys. We did. I'll show you.
I understand.
Okay.
Oh yeah.
So,
There are crickets in the room.
do we need this proposal? Do we need this at all? What are we saying here? Players should not use betting action to obtain change. Putting out more than the intended betting amount can confuse everyone at the table. All chips pushed out are at risk of being counted as part of the player's bet action. I think that's pretty good. Anybody opposed? All right. '74, relaxation of rules when heads up. Are guidelines needed as to which rules, if any, might be relaxed when an event is to its heads up final two players, such as relaxing disclosure or exposing rules? unlimited number of raises, etc.? Or should this be left as a house decision? It is a rule. It is a rule that we use commonly in heads-up tournaments. In any tournament that you get down to the final 2 players, you're able to do pretty much whatever you want to do as far as showing your cards. Basically, the exact opposite of what we have with our non-disclosure rules. Should we point that out to the players? Does this make it more interesting, or do we just want to leave that as a rule that we know about but don't? Or do some people out there not even allow it heads up? You don't allow it heads up.
No, it's showing cards. Never. Not on at any stage. I'm not going to be able to turn over a king and sit here and stare down Mike and do all that. We don't allow that at any point in time for any of our stuff. I don't know. We've never had anybody complain about it. They'll fight us on the antes every once in a while if they want to say, hey, can we play without the antes or something like that. I think once or twice we might allow that, or they'll do it anyway. They'll just stop giving the dealer antes, even if we said you have to. But as far as being able to show a card, stuff like that, that's not something we do. I'm not saying I can't go the other way on it. It's just something we've never done.
Tommy, you don't let players, you don't change the rules heads up either, right?
Tommy from the Venetian, just the number of raises, but we don't allow them to talk any more than we normally would, or we don't allow them to expose their cards.
What was the last part? You don't allow them to what?
The only thing we allow is the unlimited number of raises. That's the easiest way to say it.
What we could say, because there's quite a bit of a disparity, is just that the House should clearly post what rules, if any, are relaxed, so the players know, because it does vary from house to house. But
okay, I think that's pretty much a house rule then. If we can't get agreement on it, and again, we allow it, but it's not something we advertise.
Do we need to have anything in the TDA rules at this point on it, or just leave it for the moment?
Scratch. Suspicion of collusion. If a player suspects collusion, he should notify the TD. Is that... Where did this come from, Mike?
This was actually originally in, I think it's current TDA Rule 14, which says that except where a house gives a player an express right to ask to see a hand, or that a hand must be shown, asking to see a hand is a privilege, not to be abused, and it's supposed to be based solely on collusion or suspicious player behavior. In a lot of the pre-meetings that we had with TDs here, the consensus was to remove that limitation from the ask to see a hand and make it a separate condition.
I would think it should be under the same heading. You know, if we're talking about collusion there, I would put that sentence right there.
Exactly. Break it out, place it so it's if a player suspects collusion, what should they do?
That
Notify
should be part
the
of Rule
TD.
14 then. You know,
What's that?
In Rule 14, if we're telling them that they can't look at a hand unless they suspect
Understood, but
right would be where I
Jack, for example, was one of several TDs that does not want that limitation on the reason for asking to see a hand.
And also to go a step further, just in the way this is written, I don't know that a player should ask the dealer to call the floor. If I suspect collusion for whatever reason, I personally think it's better to discreetly go speak to the tournament director so that the person who you are suspicious of isn't getting the heads up so that he can get rid of that third card he's got or whatever. Also, you don't want to be the whistleblower, whether you're right or wrong. And thirdly, how often does the dealer not speak English, and it may not happen in an appropriate time. It's so easy between hands just to tell the TD, hey, I think this is what's going on. Could you come and babysit the table for a minute? Then they see for themselves, whether it's yay or nay. I don't think that the dealer needs to get involved in this.
James, good catch. The amendment was actually made between the handout and the screen behind you.
Oh, so I mean, if I just turned around,
if you just turn around, you'll see what you're talking about.
I never know what I'm talking about.
Right. In other words, in the handout said that the player should ask the dealer to call the floor.
As Emily Latella said, that's something else. Never mind.
Exactly, and a lot of people objected to this idea because that would require a player to publicly announce that, hey, I suspect so and so is cheating. This way, the player can discreetly contact the TD and explain their concerns.
Yeah, I'm not sure we need a rule for this. Because I think it might be a common sense, and even anything that draws attention to
Well, that's
issues.
an option too.
Yeah.
Do we either vote it in or just drop it and let it put it to a vote?
Just drop it.
Keep it, hands up.
No need for it.
Drop it. Okay, Mike. You carry a lot of weight here, Mike, but not that much. Sam says if you see somebody robbing the bank, if you suspect a robbery, please inform the bank.
Please tell the police. Don't tell the teller.
No, he says inform the bank. All right, here we go. Payouts and finish order on multiple bust outs. Are there any guidelines needed as to payout splits and finish order if multiple players bust on one table versus separate tables? I think we discussed this in depth last time, and there's nothing in the TDA about it right now? Yeah, that's a good start. Okay, so where were we at with that, Mike? Can you kind of remind us where we got hung up?
Well, in 2011, we were not quite able to reach agreement on this, so we basically tabled it to this summit. So hopefully we can adopt some guidelines here.
Well, Tav just had an interesting. He said in New Jersey it's illegal for them to split a prize. Gaming regulation. I don't know. In Nevada, do you guys chop? So if it's because our rule is effectively if they're on separate tables, they chop the prize. If they're on the same table, you go big stack. Same if it's a satellite ticket, we'll chop the ticket rather than because the question came up in Monaco. We had two different tables for the ticket, and they said, would you go big stack so you can award the ticket, and we just chopped the ticket. So that's kind of our rule. But I never heard of a gaming regulator that put that in, but I'm learning something new.
I think that's why we didn't make a rule, and I think we need to move on and not make a rule on that one, because if the gaming commission is against it, we don't want them to have a problem with TDA rules.
We can make a suggested procedure and not have it be a rule.
Yeah.
So what do we do on this? What is a suggested procedure if you have no legal issues, in your opinion?
Same table, big stack. I mean,
yeah.
If the suggested procedure then would be if it's at the same table, the big stack.
Paying three players,
Yeah.
or paying two spots, 3 players bust out, 2 on the same table. Is someone out of the money?
No,
Same hand.
not if you're still at 2 tables.
But yeah, how would you handle that if it's against the law to split the payouts?
I wouldn't.
What do you mean you couldn't? Who would get the money?
The highest.
But if they're different tables, how do you know?
Because we keep an eye on it.
But so the hand would have had to have started at the exact same moment. How are you going to be certain?
You're on the boat. Yeah, it's hand for hand.
You're doing hand for hand. Okay. But well, it could be not hand for hand. Wow.
So Neil, everybody, that's a good question. What if 2 people at one table bust and 1 at the other one? You could tell who had the most chips at the one table, but I would say split it 3 ways.
I think I would probably fall back to rule 1 and I'd just chop it 3 ways. But he's waving at us, so I think John has a.
Yeah, John Short, Southwest Poker News. Y'all know Jimmy Summerfield. When he runs a tournament and it gets down to the bubble, 1 away from the money, it goes not hand for hand, but round for round. And if say 5 people bust during that one round of the chip, one round of each table, then they take the last 4 places, the first 4 places of the prize money, and they divide it by 5. That way, they're not having to run around and count stacks, and it really works really well. out there.
So at the end of one rotation of the button, they're holding up the action on
Yes.
that table.
Yep.
While so no matter how fast or slow
no matter
a
how
table
fast,
plays.
it's his button.
Okay, what if one table is 6-handed and one is 7-handed? And what if you?
I don't know the exact how they do that, but as opposed to hand for hand, the round for round works really well because it creates the less confusion about who went out first, who had the bigger stack, and the players like it because instead of one guy getting nothing, everyone's pretty happy the fact that if 9 players go out, they split the first 8 places, and so everybody wins.
Cardi.
It sounds like there's a lot of different ways of doing it. It sounds like a lot of procedures that are interesting for thought. I don't know that we can all agree to something on the spur of the moment, but certainly something that we want to carry forward with us, and especially if you have a law that prevents that.
Okay. I think we're. I think you. No rule.
No rule. No procedure.
Okay. No procedure. Take my advice and do as you please.
Okay.
All right. Is that it? We there? I have a couple more things, little things, but this is the illustrations you want to put up there.
There are a couple after the recommended procedures: efficient movement of players, timing of dealer pushes. I guess those are the.
Oh yeah, we did have a couple people want to make sure that we touched on that timing of dealer pushes to make sure that people. As a procedure, it's such a service to the players if your dealers walk up and there's 30 seconds left in the level to not push through. We're actually, for our procedures, what we're trying to do, it's easier where we control all the staff. We're not going to do a push during chip races either, because if the player comes back and says, hey, my chips are all screwed up, well, that dealer's on break. That did it with the floor guy at that point in time. So there's not, those are two things I think where the push can really be important. When you're pushing on a break, you're costing somebody a double big blind if that dealer shoves in there and costs the hand. And like I said, we're also adjusting, so we're not going to push during a chip race. We'll move it by 5 or 10 minutes, whatever it has to be. But does anyone see any issues with?
Yeah, I mean, I would be okay with this proposal of dealer pushes should not occur within X minutes of breaks. I know it's not possible for everybody, but if it is, the players really, really complain about it. I mean, constantly. So I'd like to see the TDA be proactive in that and say, we're going to pay attention to that. Obviously, it's not,
And a lot of that is it's very key because the dealers push on the hour and on the half. And if we're playing hour and half-hour rounds, that's until you get a break that puts it on the 15 or the 20, it's going to consistently be a problem. And the problem, just playing devil's advocate from the dealer standpoint, is if now they push late, the guy at the end of the chain is getting screwed on his break, and it just keeps perpetuating, keeps getting to be a bigger and bigger problem as the tournament goes on. And I don't have any idea what to propose as the answer to that, but it is a problem not just for the players, but for the house, the dealers as well. What Will said, if the tournament started at 05, that's still going to be a problem because eventually the clock is going to catch up. Plus, the dealer who's pushing at the end of maybe a 4 or 5 game push, it's going to be 05 or 35. Okay, I know that there's a question back here first, and then there'll be a question up here.
Not a question, but very similar for us. Hi, Christian, Australia. We can't regulate our dealer pushes. We're unionised. So we start all our tournaments at 10 minutes past the hour. So the dealers are on 20-minute pushes, and all our tournaments start at 10 past. So it doesn't happen very often. It's the best way we found to minimise it. We start our tournaments knowing that it's going to be difficult to change the dealer pushes. So you structure it that way.
You do 20-minute downs?
Yeah, 20-minute.
Could you do 30?
No.
Well, I think what you said is earlier.
20
no
or
matter
40
when
we
you
do.
start the tournament or the pushes, it's all going to get messed up. So I think the rule it should be is if it is pushed during, it goes to the previous blinds. So the blinds just don't go up on a player because of a dealer push.
But
I think that's the simple
Where do you
solution.
draw the line on that? Because now the dealer who's leaving, for whatever reason, flips a card, takes him a little longer to get out of the box. Do you do it with 8 seconds left, with 7 seconds left, with 1 second, with 30? Then you can't be just arbitrarily that they get one more hand. because what about this table over here where the dealer just pushed?
I mean, the dealer push has always been a natural part of it, and that's why the blinds go up. Sorry, they pushed at that time. That's what we always tell our players. And I agree with Matt 100%. I mean, that's one of the biggest beats we always get from players is, so if it is, well, it becomes the TD's discretion to come in there and say, obviously, you know, is pushed within X amount of seconds, or it was at that time. If the dealer didn't start riffling, said last hand, you know what I mean, and the new dealer is coming in, and they went up, the blinds were announced up before that dealer got in the box, it should be the old blinds. I think something along those lines is what we should adapt.
Yeah,
That way we don't have to worry about any of the
Actually, what
unions.
you just said right there could be the litmus test, is that when the announcement is made, if the dealer has already sat down, you know, and the announcement made, that's what the test is, regardless of how long it takes the push to come through. And another thing is that those of us who have 2, 3, and 4 table tournaments, this is a much easier situation to avoid completely than it is when you have hundreds and hundreds of tables where it's going to be a perpetual thing the entire tournament. If you have a small tournament going on, this should never be a factor for you. You should always be able to work around it.
Yeah, so I think we have using the shuffle machine is green button. We have a hand shuffle, which is the riffle. And if we have dealer push, we have if it's announced before they enter the box.
Chris?
Yeah, I was just going to touch same thing. I think the tournament directors, you know, in my tournaments, if I see I walk over to the table and I say, deal one more hand at this last level. And as I make my announcement to the rest of the tournament, dealers' blinds are up, give them the blinds, and I'll say, you guys are going to deal one more hand at the last level. I think it's a little more, the players like it, it's better customer, you know, the players appreciate it. I think the tournament directors just need to maybe get
smaller
out.
tournaments, that's doable.
Right, and I've only got 24 tables to deal with. I don't have 300.
Right.
You know.
When players think that the tournament director is on top of it, paying attention, they're more easy to get along with when maybe they don't get that extra hand in at the lower level.
I do think that something like TDA recommends the dealer pushes don't happen. And I think that's fine.
And to avoid when possible. So
I mean, I think that's fine to add. I think that opens their eyes up to people to the other term directors that aren't here that may not understand or even think about it. You know, this actually puts it in there, and then if the players say, you know.
What do we want the X to be?
Get up one more comment here.
We have Jim Hummel, Muckleshoot Casino. We run our live with our tournament, and the dealers rotate completely through them. So that's an impossible thing to do, because when they we don't have a set bunch of dealers that come in to deal strictly our tournaments or strictly our live. Like on Sundays, when we usually run our bigger tournaments, 12 to 15 table tournaments, we bring in our all on-call dealers, and they are the floor supervisor at the time lines them all up, and they go right on through the whole thing. They may be 2 or 3 tables tournament, 2 or 3 tables live, and you could not stop them to say, we've got to hold this dealer here while the downs go up, or you
Okay,
know.
that's a good point. Now, the difference between our rules and our procedures are that this is our recommendation, and if it doesn't work for some reason in your card room, then don't do it. But it's good to have, you know, there's a lot of people who never even thought about it, so it's good to have recommended procedures.
The only problem I see with having it saying in the rules anywhere that the TDA recommends that is that it's when Brian Vickers Hollywood Casino. I foresee a situation where players are going to read that and say, "Why are you tapping in? The TDA says you shouldn't do that. You know, why are you tapping in right now?" And they're going to come at you for no good reason. I really feel this should be left up to the House, and that it shouldn't be in the TDA rules at all.
Right, so I'm just going to Rule 19 here, Kevin again. The hand begins with the first riffle or dealer push. If we just add that in, it's not recommending any procedures for anybody. We're just saying a new hand begins with the first riffle. Obviously, they're not going to riffle if they're getting pushed, so it begins with a riffle or dealer push. And then the next line is, if an automatic shuffler is being used, the hand begins with the green button. I think adding that in as a procedure, that way there's no complaining. We already know it's the old limit. Nobody has to change anything that they're doing already.
And also what could be added would be that the sign-in, the dealer has got to do the sign-in on his own time. If for whatever reason he doesn't sign in before he sits down, he gets the first handout and then he signs. But how many of us have watched the dealer sign in while 8 seconds is ticking off the clock, and now there's no recourse other than to say that the dealer screwed up and cost you the blind or whatever. Can we make that a procedure?
So.
Yeah. Okay, we'll write something in.
We never talked about one. We didn't talk about this one.
Which one?
Efficient movement of players.
One just says we missed one. So efficient movement of players. Moving players for braking and balancing should be done expeditiously so that not to unduly miss blinds, otherwise delay a game. If possible, players should have racks for chip transport, and sufficient color-ups should be conducted so players do not carry unnecessary large quantities of chips.
Okay. Any problems with that as a recommended procedure?
Yeah. Common sense, easy.
Current recommended procedures, TDA recommended procedures are policy suggestions, general guidelines to reduce errors and enhance events management. They also may apply to situations with too many variations and address with one universal rule. The fairest ruling in these cases may require use of multiple raises, evaluation of all circumstances, and reliance on rule number 1 as a primary guide. What does that mean?
Common denominator.
What's the thinking there, Mike?
Well, the first procedure is just a recommendation to use an all-in button. Right.
Oh, so this is not part of the...
Oh, I got you. No, these are the existing. You're right. These are the current recommended procedures.
Okay. All-in buttons. It is advisable to use an all-in button to clearly indicate that a player's bet is all-in. It's preferable that these buttons are kept by the dealer rather than each player. The dealer places the all-in button in front of an all-in player in full view of the rest of the table. Who doesn't use all-in buttons in the room?
What could some of you who don't use all-in buttons tell us why you think that they're not good? Or, I mean, maybe your house just doesn't want to pay for them, but is there anybody who thinks that having all-in buttons are a bad idea?
Damien, Crown Casino, Melbourne, Australia. We are not allowed to use them by the government. We think it's a good idea, but we can't use it.
You're not allowed to?
Not allowed to.
The Gaming Commission says you can't? Well, then you can't. Okay.
But, okay, somebody who's not governed by a law or a rule, can somebody speak up for not being in favor of all-in buttons? Or those of you who said you don't use them, you just don't use them because you don't want to? I mean,
and again, if you have a gaming commission that's made a rule like that,
lobby it.
Yeah, we can provide reasoning to have one.
But we also have a lot of distributors here in Las Vegas who sell all-in buttons fairly cheaply. You also don't need to have great big huge giant brightly colored ones, although that is the best because that's what helps to avoid the problems going forward. But the little itty bitty ones are almost useless if you're gonna, when you are gonna get them, get ones that do the job, which is to avoid problems going down the road.
Okay.
I have an example of why an all-in button is super important, and it was a big event in Europe where a player said I'm all in and puts out 2,000 in chips. Puts out a stack of 100, says I'm all in. It gets around to the guy wearing the headphones, and he says, I call, and turns his cards over. Now the floor gets called to the table. There's no all-in button, and this player has effectively made him call an all-in. He loses all of his chips because he's wearing headphones and didn't put that out. Now, I know that wearing headphones is not an excuse, but at the same time, that mistake never happens if there's an all-in button on the table. So, it is player friendly.
Yeah, when we brought him in, we said it was a courtesy to the players, because then immediately the players who want to go, well, what if the dealer didn't put it out? Then I'm not committed to it. It's like, no, it's a tool essentially to hopefully help eliminate the situations like Matt just described. We treat it as a courtesy. The players like it. We use it essentially globally. Danny McDonough was in from Asia last week in our meetings, and he said his players in Macau are now our all-in buttons are triangular in shape. They're even doing like this like really excited when they're going all in because it's become a part of it.
That's
They're,
not a
Yeah,
term
but
of poker.
that's not all in. This
yeah,
is
that's
not a
not
raise.
exactly. That's
Yeah.
not a legal betting
Don't
term.
be mistaken.
At least it better not be in Macau. I'll have to ask Danny, but it better not be an accepted betting term. But
If it is, then I'm going to insist on
Upstairs
take
with
it
Nelly.
upstairs to Nelly being a raise.
if you can say it in Mandarin or Cantonese, he'll let it go.
Okay. Bringing in bets is discouraged. This is a very unpopular one with the players when the dealers bring in the bets. Routinely bringing in bets and bringing in chips as betting and raising proceeds around the table is poor dealing practice. The reduction in bet stacks may influence the action, create confusion, and increase the risk of error. The TDA recommends that dealers do not touch the player's bet unless count is needed. Only the player currently facing action may ask the dealer to bring in chips. This is kind of a retraining of dealers. We've had to do this at Commerce where we don't get dealers, we don't see dealers for 2 years, and that's the way they've always done it. So we basically have to re-announce this in our pre-dealer meetings that they have to do this. Does anybody still feel that the bet should be brought in by a show of hands? Okay, I actually like this as a procedure. Personal belongings. The table surface is vital for chip stack management. Dealing with betting in the table and spaces around it, legroom and walkway should not be cluttered with non-essential personal items. Each card room should clearly display its policy on items that may or may not be allowed in the tournament area. I don't know. That one's not as important to me, but Mike, you get a lot of complaints about that? Is that where this came from?
Are we talking about the personal belongings?
Yes.
In 2011, because 2011 basically followed 2009 and 2010, so if you go back 5 years ago, there was a lot of clutter. We actually had some photos of people that had all kinds of stuff in and around the table.
Like right here.
Obviously, that's been dramatically cleaned up now, but that's really where that came from.
I'm okay with that, except I would remove the last sentence.
Okay. Disordered stub. When cards remain to be dealt and the stub is accidentally dropped, it appears that it may be disordered. It is first preferable to try and reconstruct the original order of the stub if possible. If not possible, try to create a new stub using only the stub cards, the muck, and the prior burn cards. These should be scrambled, shuffled, cut, and play proceeds with the new stub. If the stub is dropped and it becomes mixed in with the muck and the burn cards, then scramble the stub, muck, and burn cards together, shuffle and cut, play proceeds with a new stub. This is actually one that comes up fairly often. I know that some people, maybe in this room, does anybody split pots? We're just going to chop up the pot. We don't want any of those burn cards and discards to show up again, so we're going to split the pot. Nobody splits pots? That's great. Oh. Yeah, whenever possible, we don't want to split the pots. This is a standard rule that I've used recently, often. And again, we don't want to affect the play of the game if substantial action's already taken place. And I feel that this is a good one to add.
Any objection to adding this as a recommended procedure?
Oh, this already exists as a procedure.
No, these are
This is one of the procedures adopted in 2011.
All right.
Oh, okay.
So it's the next one. So I don't
Premature board cards.
It's already rolled.
Will has a question. Will Porter with a question or a comment on the language on that disordered stub on number 3, when the stub is dropped. Since we're recommending what dealers should do in bringing in bets, recommend that the dealer spread the stub separately from the muck, because there are dealers who put the stub right on the muck. I watched it last night in the tournament, but That could be a recommended dealing procedure, spreading the stub separate from the muck.
Premature board cards, board and burn cards are occasionally dealt prematurely by mistake before the action on the preceding round is finished. A wide number of possibilities can occur, affecting the flop, turn, and river of respective burns. When dealing the new board cards, it is preferable to include the non-revealed original board and burn cards that remain in the stub as part of the new board and burns, if possible.
It's already a current rule.
It's already one. Okay. I have a couple more.
Will just
small
suggested
ones.
one. Will just suggested adding a rule. The only problem with that, Will, is that when we're talking about dealing procedures, it would be easy to write in 18 suggested procedures, and that's not what we're really trying to do. We could write in a procedure that says the button goes clockwise, but there's a certain assumption. So I think and I agree with you. I don't like when dealers do it, but I don't know if we need to put it in procedures. Okay, you had some?
Is there anything that should be said, in anybody's opinion, on tournament directors getting involved with the deal-making process? How much involvement should we have? None. Okay. Player says, we want a chip count deal. Are you saying that we shouldn't do it? We should just hand a pencil and paper and a calculator? Do we offer any protection to anybody that doesn't know how to make a deal? Or is that part of the skill process?
The one thing I'll say on this, we made the decision 2 years ago to publish all deals. They're fully reported to Hendon Mob, to Bluff, whatever. You can watch them on our little live streams. We wanted to take it out of the bathroom and put it right onto the table. We think deal making has become a skill, whether we like it or not, in MTTs. And so we do it live right on the table where everyone can see. They have to sign a form. So if first prize was $1 million and they only got $600K, they can't come back later and say, hey. But because we've made that decision, if they say we want to see ICM or we want to see chip count or whatever, we will provide those numbers. We don't provide any advice on the deal. If they want to give first place more than first place, or they want to do whatever, that's entirely up to the people. We also do everything we can our rule technically says one translator or friend, because we also don't, the situation you run into, the EPT Grand Final last year, the two people that finished, Mohsen and Lucille, they each had like 42 people in their group, their backers, all the rest. And you don't need the negotiation to take place on the rail between the stakers over how we're going to chop the prizes. So we say one person is allowed to each person who's in it. We'll let them make a phone call, yeah. And we publish it and we provide all the numbers. That's what we do at this point. But it's because we made a decision to say that we're going to allow the deals and put them out there.
There's some card rooms where their gaming commissions don't allow them to
in France, it's
participate
illegal
in deals. So
I just think if, as a tournament director, if you're not being involved in the deal process, you're not there to provide recommendations or anything. You just want to make sure your players clearly understand what the deal is, what they're getting. And I think if you don't involve yourself, you're going to ask for a lot more trouble than it's going to be worth. If you don't allow any deals at all, that's fine. But if you do have deals, you do allow the players to make the deal, you have to be involved as a tournament director.
We allow deals, but we do not get involved in them. We do not want to have anything to do with any deal, especially putting numbers out there. What if they're wrong? We never get involved in a deal, but we allow it if they want to do it.
We allow them, but we feel that the tournament director needs to be involved in the numbers, not in who gets what. That's up to the players, but we want to make sure that the numbers add up. They frequently, if you leave it up to the players, they're going to make a mistake in the payouts, and then when you go to pay them out, they're going to say, well, I'm supposed to get this much, and well, that's, you're wrong. There's not that much money left over, and then there's a problem. So we have the tournament directors make sure that the numbers are correct, and they sign a adjusted payout form.
yeah, I think that's really key, no matter whether you're involved in the deal or not, to make sure that whatever they come up with, everyone has agreed to it.
Comment back.
I would just hate to see someone make an agreement. We don't chop up the money for them or split the money up for them. We just hand them, first through fourth place and they sort it all out and three guys walk off who all know each other and the guy's sitting there counting the money and realizes, wait, I got shorted. I think that absolutely, if we're the ones paying out the money and we're facilitating all the other payouts, that we pay out what's agreed upon. I'm not saying that we should ever suggest a chop, suggest or make comments as to, well, what if you gave this guy $50 then you could chop, or whatever the case may be. But once they've agreed upon it, you know, for instance, if they've suggested a chop, you know, I'll say, well, what's the chop that's been proposed? They'll tell me what's been proposed. I'll say, this is what's been proposed. I'll get a yes or no vote from everybody. If I get a yes from everybody, then I'll go and split the money up and I'll pay it exactly what they proposed. That way nobody walks out of there feeling like they've been wronged. There's no possibility they're going to split the money up wrong outside the room, and it's all there under camera is exactly what the guy picked up.
Okay, so yeah, that's pretty much procedure that we follow. But if the question is like, what if somebody says, okay, I want a chip count, and then some new guy comes up and says, we want ICM. Are you now going to provide both these numbers for them? Do you have those things access to? Are you responsible for giving these numbers to the players? Yes, you feel that you are. First place is $1,000, and the guy says, I want $1,100, and you know these two players are first-time players that are in second and third, and you're going to allow this guy that plays every day, the sharp young guy, to take $1,100 and take more than first place money. Are you going to stop that?
I would not allow that. No.
So there are some deals that you would get involved with.
Well, the same thing to Matt's. I think I saw you use this example on a 2+2 discussion on this a year or so ago. Is second and third are like really desperate to get their money. Like it matters to move that third place payout to just under second, and they both really want it. So they look to first and say, look, all right, it is 1,000. We'll give you 11. Just can we please have a deal? So the two of them. I mean, at that point, you know, it's. Either my comment is we're either involved or we're not, and I don't think we should ever. It's the players' money at their point in time. If you facilitate a chop, you should provide any numbers, verify their numbers, make sure it's paid out properly. Everybody gets their taxes, whatever it's supposed to be. If you're gaming, you know, like in France, we can't do it. EPT Deauville, no chops. But otherwise, you know, we publish the deals, and it's us who've said they're going out. So I think we have to take responsibility for it. And if you're fully involved and you're standing there, and the cameras are on, as Brian said, you can at least, you can hopefully make sure that nobody's being bullied. A procedure that I think it was here in 2009, somebody mentioned that they used that I think is brilliant for smaller rooms where you have a lot of locals and lots of you hit a final table and everybody just wants a chop so they can hit the cash games. I'm almost positive it was here, but I don't know who recommended it. They said the TD steps in and says, all right, everybody, the deal is $550 for everybody first to eighth place. The dealer is going to give every player a red and a black card. If you like this deal, you're going to put the red card in face down, and if you don't like it, you're going to put the black card in. The dealer is then going to turn over all 8 cards, and if I see black, we're done talking and we're playing.
Yeah, we actually started that up in Mesquite.
There you go.
Yeah, we started that about 8 years ago up in Mesquite, and it worked beautifully. That way nobody got bullied as to, you know, nobody wants to be the one holdout, but as soon as they can be anonymous, it's amazing how many people don't agree to deals.
Okay. So that's just conversation. Is everybody allowing the bubble to be paid? Not allowing the bubble to be paid? We've had this constantly comes up. Just want to make sure that everybody's protecting those that don't want to make deals. And I know that in some venues there's actually been issues with people of the staff suggesting that they pay the bubble so they don't have to play hand for hand. And I don't think that's proper.
The best way is to use the black and red card. We use that for the bubble. If there's a proposal for the bubble by one player in my tournament, I will go ahead and say what the proposal is. I will pass out the cards. We'll have a vote. That way, if one person doesn't want to pay the bubble, they can remain anonymous, and it's said and done, and we go from there.
So
the black and red card system works great.
I would imagine that you pay fewer bubbles than anyone else, which is good in my opinion, because players, you know, the bottom line is most players don't want to pay the bubble, but they don't want to vote no, so you're protecting them that way. Yeah.
Like Chris Tulalip Casino, we have a no harassment policy as well. Once the player decides that they don't want a deal, I step in, and there will be no more discussion. anybody who harasses this player, I will invoke penalties starting with 1 orbit. And at the end of the tournament, those are huge penalties.
I think that's so important. I play in tournaments all over the country, and I see constant harassment when people don't want to make a deal at the final table, and I can't believe that tournament directors allow that to happen. They even have a rule in one of Jan's tournaments that if somebody objects to the deal, no one else is allowed to bring it up except that person who objected. Otherwise, they get a penalty.
And harassment can be very subtle. It doesn't have to be, 4-letter words and whatnot. Any type of intimidation is harassment and should not be tolerated. Got a question here, and then one over here, and then one in the middle.
Just a quick comment. I mean, we kind of take that even a step further. We do exactly what Linda said, but we also make announcements right to the final table. We'll tell them before they even start talking deal. That way, if even a couple guys want to bring it up and another person doesn't, as soon as they say it, then they're not supposed to be brought up until that person says it. And, again, for us, we don't do bubbles. Personally, it's got to be a bubble somewhere. Why not pay 37, 38, 39? It's got to be a bubble somewhere. So we don't, especially on multiple payout tables, no bubbles. We don't even bother with asking. I just think it's like too much time to go around and ask 36 players if they want to pay the bubble. But that's just my opinion.
Brandy Pachunga. We do not pay the bubbles, and I want to thank Jan for talking to the ladies about that when you and Linda gave your talk and defending that, because those ladies, they just keep on going, I want to pay the bubble, I want to pay the bubble. Or like, we don't pay the bubble. Whatever they want to do on their side, that's their business. But
yeah,
no
we gave a talk to the ladies there, and somebody asked, well, what do you think about paying the bubble? And we both said
FTB.
So
You go in, fill in the blanks.
What are we doing to the bubble?
I think
I'd like to do to you, baby.
I think one of the things that tournament directors can do is stop the clock when it's a final table, and most deals are made at the final table. And a lot of times mistakes are made among players trying to figure out their deal because they're under the constraint of that clock going. And a lot of TDs say, well, we want to keep the tournament moving. Well, if you'll stop the clock and let us make a deal, the tournament's over then. And if you don't, it could go on for however long it takes to play it out. So, you might want to consider stopping the clock as a courtesy to allow the players, give them maximum time, 5 minutes, 2 minutes, whatever you want, to allow us to make a deal without that pressure of those huge blinds looming.
Almost
Does
never.
anybody here not stop the clock?
Almost
At
never
least
will
the
I
first
ever
time?
stop the clock for anything.
Yeah, I've done that. I've actually let the clock run.
Yeah,
on their
I
second and
almost
third
always
attempt.
let the clock
I'm
run.
saying-
If we think that, okay, this is really going to be it, and it's not going to be, let's discuss this deal and then start playing again. Discuss the deal, starts playing again. A lot of local players, sometimes we'll give them a courtesy and maybe stop the clock or add a couple minutes on. But as a general rule, we never stop the clock for anything.
The first time you do or not?
No, first time they propose a deal.
Right. Will you stop the? If
No.
if we just got to the final table and they say we'd like to talk about a deal, will you stop it one time or not?
No, I keep it going. If they end up taking a long time, and maybe we'll give them a couple minutes. If it's just if they're just needlessly arguing over a deal, then the clock keeps going.
Along those same lines, I never stop the clock for the bubble add time. Aria has something that they're doing for payouts. You go hand for what is the deal that you do? You go hand for hand on every bubble spot, or every three places they go hand for hand. How is that player?
Does it count for all those hand for hands?
No, they do 2 minutes for every hand.
They add 2 minutes not for every hand they play them.
So yeah, how many people stop the clock or add time or anything when the bubble's playing?
I do both. Actually, I won't stop. I'll stop the clock at a final table if players want to, if they want to make a deal.
I'm talking
But
about on the bubble.
on the bubble, we add time back. We add half of whatever time is used up. So if it starts with 30 minutes and they end up with 15 minutes left of a round, we add 7.5 minutes back.
Yeah.
Why is it player friendly? What if I like playing
Well,
on the bubble? What if I like that style of play? What if I prefer it to be faster? What if I'm a big stack? Who is it friendly to?
I disagree. We don't. It's got to be. It has to be egregious for us to back it up. Like, we have 90-minute levels. If you're going through the third or the fourth level and the bubble is just never ending, then you can give some of that time back. But if it takes 60 minutes or 90 minutes or whatever, that's what it took.
In our dailies, we don't stop, but for our bigger events, we'll stop the clock, keep track of hands, and then take 2 minutes off for every hand, and we'll freeze the level. So even if it goes, let's say 45 hands, we have a major bubble. Those players get the benefit of the lower level.
Sam, what do we do there at the Commerce?
Did you guys already discuss World Series where they let the clock run but they don't advance to a new level? Too, that's another one that's out there. I like that one personally. It's reasonable. It lets the clock keep running.
Okay. I know you feel it's reasonable, but there's 1 minute left in the level, you stop it. If there's 90 minutes left in the level, you stop it after 90 minutes.
I mean, the fact of the matter is, bubble play is part of tournaments, and we believe at the Commerce that there are obviously some players that like it. Some people don't like the hand-for-hand play, but it is part of tournaments. It doesn't matter how long it takes. I've had bubbles that last 30 seconds. I've had bubbles that lasted over 2 hours. But, if you state that you have 40-minute blind levels, after 40 minutes, blinds go up. I mean, it's just part of play, and it's going to, once obviously the average BBs go down, obviously you're going to get one player to bust out eventually. I mean, sometimes it doesn't, but like I said, this is part of tournament play, and I mean, that's what we do.
This is like this is like calling the clock when they've had the big cheer for the last year and a half about putting in a shot clock. We have to, players are taking too long, they're tanking, we're doing all of this. This is about the players taking back their own tournament. This is if Sam's taking 5 minutes for every decision on the bubble, yes, you paid me €5,300. I paid the same €5,300. You have a little, the time to do yours. This to me this is player controlled. The bubble takes as long as the players are allowing it to take.
Incorrect. And as tournament directors, obviously, if you see a player is taking a lot of time, I mean, a player is going to speak up, we have the ability to reduce the clock procedure from 1 minute down to 10 seconds. I mean, if that one player every single hand is taking a lot of time, I mean, obviously as tournament directors, we can do something about that.
Okay. Back to the payouts. I had a couple more little things. At some points, we demand if they are going to continue to have the same amount of time in the level that they play for something. If they don't, we will reduce the amount of time. If they're playing for just a trophy, we'll give them 15-minute levels. I am in favor of making those when they make those deals, we don't allow them to then continue to play the same hour-long 40-minute levels or whatever they're playing. Once they make those deals, leave $100 in the trophy. We feel that it's necessary to, and we don't really have problems with that. People don't argue that, but that could be a suggestion that you make, that if they're going to play for just a trophy or no money at all, just to have the title, then I think that reducing the amount of time is a good thing to do.
Or you start charging them $100 an hour for the dealer.
Okay. Anything else on that? That was just some suggestions and things that we could talk about. Ken, as tournament directors, can we ever call the clock on somebody? Yes. Right. Still valid. Who can call the clock? Is there any time that you allow anybody else to call a clock on a separate table? I only allow that on the bubble. Somebody else can call a clock. Is there any other reason why anybody would be able to call a clock on a separate table? That's just another thing that I have on there. Yes.
Whoa. Might go overboard.
I did call a clock on a player once. That's when they asked to stop the clock to make a deal. And I told them I wouldn't stop the clock. They were only four-handed. They can talk and deal. And so the guy that was under the gun decided he wasn't going to act until they made the deal. So I just told him he had 1 minute, and then 10 seconds and his hand's dead. So I wasn't going to let them run the tournament, pretty much.
Okay.
And I feel you should be able to call a clock on situations like that.
Okay. The one that's come up a couple times in the last couple of years is, are we allowing third players that are not involved in the hand to call the clock on players during a break? During a break. You're not in the hand, but they're at the table with two other players. Are you allowed to call the clock on those two players?
I don't know what you mean by during a break.
They're on break.
They're supposed to be leaving. Player sticks around and then that's
Some people say you shouldn't be able to call the clock on somebody while they're on break because you're able to leave the table. Why would you be able to?
I can't even imagine anybody wanting to do that. They're on break.
Well, people want to see the outcome of the hand, and then they want to go on break.
Yeah. Oh, no.
That's what I'm saying.
No, I wouldn't let them.
Calling the clock's usually a time issue, and when you're on break, there's no time running down, so I would always say no to that.
So just something that's come up. Are we allowing people to call the clock on people that are on break? Something to think about. Anybody have any ideas on how to make players play faster? It's really hurt the enjoyment of the game for some people. Some people say they just play too slow. We've had some tournaments where players have just gone deep in tournaments, and it's just painful as tournament directors and dealers and other players to watch these guys play so slow. I think if you saw the World Series Poker live stream last year, it was painful. It takes away from the enjoyment of the game of the other players, and it's not good for TV. It's not good for anything. I don't know. And to be honest, some people actually say that they play that slow because it tilts other players. Is that something that we can look at? Like Neil says, we need to police our own game. We need the players to take back their own game, start calling the clock. That might be an issue that we proactively say, if somebody is slow at your table, go ahead and feel free to call the clock on that player, and that's going to cause more work for your staff, but it's also going to speed these guys up. Maybe they will learn how to play faster.
Part of this is also caused because of what happened to Tiffany Michelle. The backlash of her calling the clock at the World Series, which everybody was watching, and then seeing her just kind of get crucified for doing it, has really made people afraid to do it. You're sitting there, it's a 5K tournament or something, and you're like, well, it's for their tournament life, and it's kind of, you know what? In level 4, I find it hard to believe you need 10 minutes to make a decision. And the arguments I have with players all the time, I had a player say, I didn't have long enough to think. I'm like, you 12 table online. You can make every decision in 6 seconds across 12 tables. You're telling me 7 minutes wasn't enough to figure out what you were doing here. So that's why when players say, there should be a shot clock, there should be all of this, we know that 60% of our players are playing online. Maybe not in this group because we're in the United States, the land of the free. But I use my outside voice for that. I'm really sorry. But they've all been in situations where they're making decisions in 5 or 6 seconds at a time. So I tell the players all the time, you have to take back your tournament. This is call the clock after a minute, 2 minutes. Trust your dealers in your floor to know what a reasonable amount of time is.
Okay. Does anybody else have anything else?
Matt, on the slow play thing, I've used Rule 54 in my tournaments where players are constantly taking a minute and a half to make a decision. I've just said, this is excessive slow play, bad etiquette, Rule 54. You're warned, continue playing properly.
Okay. Are there any other suggestions, or every couple of years we have these meetings, and there's some things that maybe a new idea that you have or you're using that works for you that might work for others. There's always something that comes out of these. If anybody has anything, please let us know. We got a few more minutes left.
Yes, I have two suggestions here. One of them I already talked to you guys in 2011. Some of the people weren't here. So on the penalties section of the rules, we have the orbit penalties and the one-hand penalty. What I found that works the best is that instead of a one-hand penalty, we always give a three-hand penalty. One hand, the guy misses one hand, okay, it doesn't hurt so much. Three hands, well, it hurts a little bit, but it's not as harsh as one orbit. So three-hand penalty, in my point of view, works way better to educate players than one hand. The other suggestion I have is that the new rule that we propose tonight, today, the player responsibilities rule, that in my opinion is so key and so important for poker that it should be rule number 2 of TDA. We have rule number 1, which is the most important rule, and this should be rule number 2 on all the rule books.
Does anybody else feel strongly about that? I do. It's let's vote to move the player responsibility to number 2. All in favor? Okay. Opposed?
Done.
The only thing it's going to do is the one problem is I know what rule number 47 is. Now you don't know anymore.
we can make it rule 1A. 1A, 1B. Yeah. Because people do quote, they know what rule 14 is. I'm not saying I do, but people know what rules. So let's make a 1A, 1B, a house responsibility, player responsibility.
Okay. Yes, Christian.
Hi. Yeah, just a couple of sort of procedures or suggestions that I've used. When it comes to penalty, I reserve the right to apply the penalty later rather than immediately. Sometimes someone might perform an action that deserves a penalty, but if I give them the penalty now, the blinds and ante means they're going to be out of the tournament. So their action warrants a penalty, but it doesn't warrant disqualification from the tournament. So I'll give them a penalty after they've faced their blinds and survived, if they survive. So if they've only got enough chips to survive one or less than one round of blinds and antes, if I give them that penalty, I'm effectively disqualifying them, and their action doesn't really warrant that. The other one is, we were talking the other day about, or yesterday, about when the button's been moved in error, and so there's been substantial action on the hand. And I was talking to some people last night, and we actually have a procedure for that. We move the button back where it should have been the next hand. So we continue the hand. The button's been moved forward. There's been substantial action. We finish the hand. The next hand, we move the button back one spot so that the players play the correct blinds. And then the hand after that, we skip one spot. So everyone pays the correct amount of blinds. And obviously, it doesn't work all the time. But in most of the time, in those situations where someone may have missed their, he's had his friend slide the button past, and now he doesn't have to play small blind, which would have put him all in, or situations like that, it corrects that most of the time.
I have a rule suggestion that I think it seems like it should be a no-brainer, but doesn't really seem like it ever has been applied. If a player wagers all of their chips but one, I think that should be an all-in, and that chip should play. They leave one chip on top of their cards as a card protector. It should just be ruled as an all-in, because it's, a guy who leaves a one chip is usually a lower denomination on top of his chip stack, and the dealer says all in, and the players say, oh no, he's not all in, he's still got the one chip left, and then he's not technically all in, and it's kind of a time waster. I think a wager of all of your chips but one chip should be an all-in the majority of cases.
No.
Okay.
I completely disagree with that as a player, because I'll do that on purpose if there's two other people in the hand, just so they can't check it down. They'll actually have to commit a big blind. Say the blinds are 10,000, 20,000. I put, all in, and I leave myself $1,000 chip. and now we get to see a flop, one of those two players now has to commit a minimum of 20,000 to put me all in. So I actually do that on purpose as a player.
To leave yourself with less.
To leave myself with one chip.
1/20th of a big blind.
No, I leave myself with 1,000 because those two players, instead of going against two other players, I now can only go up against one player. And more than likely, they're not going to do that unless they hit something. So, you know what I mean? But the point is one of them will have to contribute 20,000 to get me to put my 1,000 in. And it's a great strategy for a player. And if you don't say all in, you're not all in.
I'll say that's a terrible strategy. I'll just say it. Because you're leaving yourself with the 20th of a big blind, and they could just check.
I've seen a lot more players over the last 24 months do that strategy, and they've survived and made final tables because of those moves. And we're talking late in the tournament.
The 20th of a big blind.
They end up usually winning that hand, by the way.
They usually okay, sure.
So they get the pot.
Maybe if it's the lowest denomination chip in play and they leave that on top of their stack, they should throw that in. Something to that effect. Maybe we don't need to put it in the rules, but otherwise, I think you're promoting an angle shoot. I don't know if I'm not mistaken on that, but I think you might be promoting an angle. All right.
Getting back to the Aussie, if you don't mind, this is what I really wanted to talk about. Under Rule 20, which is the chip race, it says a player cannot be raced out of a tournament. And that's a rule that everybody already follows. That's the same verbiage we should use for the penalties, which we already do at our card club, which sounds like you do too. So taking that rule from 20 and adding that into a penalty, just so it is stated that they can't be eliminated from a tournament via a penalty. I think we already understand that.
But we don't want that to, I mean, there's some penalties where disqualification is what their penalty is.
Yeah, but we're talking about like a missed hand penalty. So that it has to be cleaned up.
Well, then we'll have to use the word may in there.
Right.
You know, yeah.
First round penalty or first time penalty.
Has there been a suggestion to standardize a payout structure as we try to make poker a sport, kind of like PGA? When a player goes to an event, they know if there's X amount of players, what they're going to get paid. That way, as players travel around the world and companies are trying to, say poker is a sport, we can have more examples.
I'll say I just tried to do that within our own company over the last 3 weeks across the planet. And I bet you couldn't get your table, and it's only you, to agree on 15%, 12.5%, 10%. Is it 2x on the bottom, 1.5x on the bottom?
If somebody came up with it, it would eliminate a huge headache.
I agree, and we should sing the praises of that person. I think we did a survey of French players because the French players were getting really, really cranky about payouts and where everything went and how it was all going. Cedric Biot did a survey. I think he had 1,200 people who participated in his survey. It came down 33 for 10, 12.5, and 15%, with effectively no real agreement on what the min should be, or the max, like what does first prize need to be. So I agree with the sentiment behind what you're saying. Trust me, I'm trying to get one that, so if you go to APPT Macau or EPT London, you'll know that 600 players equals X.
Even if it was just suggested.
I can't even get an agreement in Europe, let alone across, and that's with one company where I should almost be able to say, yes, we can do that, and no.
Yeah, EPT pays 15%, or GPTL pays 15% of the fields for their main events.
EPT pays 15% with 1.6x on the bottom, 10% on the sides with a guaranteed of 2x. Our national tours are paying 12.5, and for Danny and David, I believe it's 15% for the mains and 10 or 12.5 for the sides.
And I'm a fan of flatter payouts myself. I just think it keeps more money in the poker industry. The pros seem not to like it, but I've heard from some pros that actually like it but don't want to be exposed as liking it because they think it might,
make them a wuss.
Yeah, make people think less of them. But I think that Bellagio had this payout years ago where they paid 100 places on 400, 25% of the field, and the pros went absolutely nuts. But I went and watched this tournament as my role with the WPT, and saw when there was 101 players left, and you saw all the players looking around, walking around, stalling, and they were just barely getting their money back, 12,500 on a 10,000. And when that bubble broke, you heard applause from players around the room. Now the pros were upset and making fun of it, but there's 100 people there that 50 of them have probably never cashed in a WPT before that now say, I have a WPT cash, may have enough money to go play the next event, may pick up some confidence that they have now cash in one of these events and feel like they can do it again. For our $10 million event, I've already put out that we're paying 300 spots based on 2,000 players, so that's 15% there. Making 2 millionaires. So whether we get 600 players or whether we get 2,000, we're paying 300 as a minimum, and we might go up from there. So I'm a fan of it. Obviously, not everybody is. I just think that it's time that we start paying a little more than 9-10%.
And those 50 guys get a ranking on GPI.
Yeah.
They'll get their name on GPI.
One of the things I want to discuss, are you done with that? Yeah. I tried to bring up in 2011 about the end of the night procedures. I think most rooms are doing the pulling the card, and that's the number of hands left, but it's not a standardized TDA either rule or procedure, and I really would like to see that as a player traveling around. It's really frustrating when you get to a room and you find out they're just running up the clock, and then I've had dealers say, oh, don't worry about it, just we're almost done, we won't play or whatever, go slow and we'll get to the end of the night. And it's absurd that that's still happening anywhere. So I'm curious if anybody's not pulling cards out and picking the number of hands left in the night, and if we can somehow standardize what those numbers are and how many minutes are left on the clock before you do that.
One question I have on that, because this has always been a discrepancy in the way we do it versus the way I think Matt and Jack do it. From what I understood, the rule was created to prevent stalling out the end of the night. So when you say at 10 minutes every night we're going to do this, well, then you're telling everybody that you need to stall up to 10 minutes.
Well, you're getting a number of hands, and that's going to prevent somebody from saying, well, I know I'm going to give, 3
if you say
to 7.
3 to 5 or 3 to 6 hands, it's
Right.
like I can still stall it out, so there's no way you're going to hit me with a blind. Like, the only reason I say this is because our procedure is we say anywhere between 7 and 15 minutes. So it's whatever the TD decides. It might be today it's 13 minutes and he's going to go and have draw it over. Tomorrow it might be 7 minutes and he's
That's
going
a
to
great
draw.
idea.
I've never understood why
When I see it
a
being
time.
3 to 7, it's pretty difficult to try to dodge a blind. Usually that's the one I think is the best one I've seen is 3 to 7. And then, you do it if you want to do it 10 or 15 minutes, it doesn't matter. Yours is fine as well. I would just like to see some sort of a guideline, so that the tournament directors know that this is a good policy, and you go to a table and you have a player pick it so that you're not the one picking the card. All the things that most people do are not anywhere written in the TDA rules.
Okay. I don't think we can come up with a guideline. I mean, a lot of people don't even have 2-day events, so it's kind of one of those things that's kind of outside the scope of the TDA. But
yeah, one last thing. I was going to revisit this about the application of the rules. I think for consistency purposes, we do have a disqualification for players. I think if you're going to assess a penalty for whatever reason in round 2, it should be the same as in round 12. And we all realize, like, if a player we put out rules, we put out TDA rules, and if players are going to get a penalty late in a tournament, and they know the rules and they run the risk, and if that means I give him a 1-round penalty and he gets busted out, so be it. It's his behavior that led to that type of ruling. I don't think anybody here as a tournament director goes up to a table and says 1-round penalty just for no reason. There's got to be something erroneously different. And I'm just saying, if you're going to apply your rules, me personally, I think for the consistency, and that's why the TDA has been such a great thing for all of us, is consistency. If you're going to apply a rule in round 2 for whatever behavior and you see the same behavior in round 12, you got to, regardless if that busts a player out or not, you have to be, you know what I mean, have to be the same.
Okay. So the process now goes like this. Mike will eagerly begin putting this all together, as he always does. And I want one more round of applause for Mike Bishop. Mike, thank you. If I had a hat, I would take it off to you. Obviously, you've been a great, great addition to the board, and we're really happy to have you. I'd also like to thank all of our new board members, Tab, Neil, and of course, the old guard, Jan, Dave, Linda, and Donna over here for obviously helping out, and Rob and all the volunteers, the AV guys over there. Thank you for listening to what must have been fairly boring to you, but we appreciate that. But everything here, and especially Kathy. Kathy's still in the room.
You hear, Kath? Well, Tommy, you stand up on behalf
Tommy,
of the nation. Yeah.
Venetian, thank you very much. It's awesome. We really appreciate it. Linda came back. Linda came back for her applause. How about a round of applause for Linda? And thank you for all of you guys. Obviously, the TDA doesn't work without all of you, and it's just a process that we're really excited and happy about. Some of the things that are done here are not easy. Getting these guys together for the first time is super exciting for me. I think that solidifies us in the realm of rules for going forward and forever. I think that, you know, there's not going to be any other sets of rules when it comes to tournaments. It's going to be the TDA, and that's going to be it. And these new rules, I will be using these rules in August for my first event. I think that these rules will not be changing for the World Series, obviously. So as the World Series rounds up, Tommy will probably, you know, for his next series, start putting these things in. And I think, I don't know, how long would you say for this, Mike?
I would expect the version 1, here we are at the end of June. Version 1 will probably be ready end of July or early August. And thereafter, there will be some feedback, and almost always a version 2 is released after that. But version 1 is in effect. It is a fully sanctioned and official release. And version 2 usually will follow that, you know, end of August, early September, something like that. And just to add to that, Matt, the TDA exam platform may be temporarily closed so that the questions can be updated to reflect the new rules. So if you go to the exam platform and you're trying to get certified and it says, you know, page not found or something, don't worry, it will be back up. Something else I wanted to say is that the addresses are up there, that if you'd like to kind of engage with your fellow TDs, the pokertdaforum.com is available to you. And also, please, if you've taken some good photos here, send them in. Okay, every year the attendees will send us you know, not every last photo you took, but if you have some real gems, send those in and to TDA group at pokertda.com or any contact email on the PokerTDA website. Just go to pokertda.com, click the contact button, and send your pictures to any one of those emails. That we'll get them from any of them.
Mike, if I can just say something regarding the quiz, if any of you feel like you'd like to write some questions for the quiz, there were always in need of that, and that was a real effort on Mike's part and the rest of ours to get those questions out. It's really tough to come up with good questions that make sense, that actually challenge somebody's knowledge. So if any of you want to send in some sample questions, we would love to get them.
Sorry, one thing that I want to throw out to everyone as well. This is one thing, it's more for kind of general discussion amongst everyone. We were approached by some developers who are building essentially like a hand history, hand tracking app for the iPhone, iPad, stuff like that. Everybody has kind of a house rule probably on what kind of notes you can take at the table. Like if you want to sit there, I mean, Gus Hansen wrote his book on every hand at the Aussie Millions that he won. And what they were asking us is what would be our position when they came to the events if players could sit there. I mean, you wouldn't be doing it. All the electronics rules are standard. You can't be on your phone when you're in the hand anyway. But when the hand concludes, you could sit down and go, well, Sam raised, and then I 3-bet, and it was turned over, and this was the board, and putting that all in. They were very concerned. I mean, obviously, they'll end up putting money into it, and if everybody says, no, you can't use it, but I don't know that we can police what's on everybody's iPads, but it was, and what apps they're using, and, you know, does this app look like me playing Chinese against Rob? But it's something that they asked us to bring up, so it would get kind of in people's minds and thinking about, you know, how that stuff impacts what we're actually doing on the, you know, what we're allowing the players to do and what kind of notes they're supposed to take. So I just wanted to throw that out there for everybody to have in their minds, because even if these guys don't build it, somebody's going to build it, and it'll be on your tables soon. So
it's on, I think.
It's a voice actor. You go down there.
like I'm becoming as smart as my smartphone. That's what I'm determined. Well, I want to thank everyone for being here. There's two things I'd like to remind you. Once we get the version 2 done, the draft 2, the version 2, first of all, I want to say to Mike Bishop, you are absolutely astonishing. I bow to you, sir. Thank you so much. Once that version 2 is done, I'm certain Carrie is going to update the app, the rules app for iPhone and Droid. I recommend everybody pick that up for $10. It's really important to support the TDA, well, to support Carrie because the money is going directly to him. But I really encourage you to pick that up. It'll help you reference it. Secondly, I would like to have feedback from you about how this summit really benefited you. I'd like for you to send feedback to Donna at biggirlpoker.com because this is going to they're going to have so many questions up there. Send it directly to me. Write this down, Donna at biggirlpoker.com. I want to hear from you. We want to publish a newsletter about how this is the most amazing thing that you can have. So we need that words from you. Can you do that for me? Yes? Yes. Okay. Thank you. Anything else before we leave?
Yeah, I'm sorry I was gone for a few minutes, but I just want to commend everybody for being so willing to vote with the majority on things and accept rules because we are trying to be united. And I also want to say, you know, I think it's important for tournament directors sometimes to think outside of the box. There isn't a rule for everything. And I do play in a lot of tournaments, and sometimes, you know, I want that tournament director to do something because a situation is happening, but it might not be in the rule book. For instance, I played in a Raz tournament the other day, and somebody with 2 kings and a queen is raising 2 people who have ace 3-7 and you know 2-4-5 because he's already said, I don't want to play the tournament anymore, I want to go. Things like that. I think that you can just say, hey, you're on penalty, now you can go. You know, we'll take your chips. Stuff like that. It shouldn't be allowed. The other day I was playing in a tournament, and a guy made a claim that half his chips had been stolen from him while he was on break. We held the tournament up for 30 minutes while this happened, while they checked the tapes and everything, and bottom line is nothing had happened. I think he should have gotten a penalty. Is it in the rule book? No. But, I mean, that's where thinking outside of the box. He inconvenienced the whole tournament. So, you know, you can make some decisions. I'm not trying to say you need to, you know, hold everybody to the letter of every single law, but, you know, just use rule number 1. Those kinds of things, to me, come under rule number 1, fairness and best interest of the tournament. So we have come so far from our first summit, and where we couldn't get along, where everybody wanted rules as long as they were the same rules they used. And, you know, ever since the second year when I kind of said, okay, you know, either you be flexible or else we're going to be done with it, ever since then we've just had so much cooperation from everybody, and it means a lot to us, and I think it's really going to make our poker world better. So thank you so much. That's it for me anyway.
I'd like everyone to give a standing ovation for the board. Can you do that? Come on. Come on, guys. Stand up. Stand up. Stand up. Come on, everybody. Stand up. Stand up and take a bow. All right. And applaud yourself. Thank you, tournament directors. Thank you.
Great advertisement.